You're listening to WSPD 77.1. This is Speed 77 Radio, your home for motorsports.
Pedal down on the floor, push it to the top, can't take no more. Big hair, sends the flag game down the head to the last lap around. Worked all week, it's time to play. Gonna get a little bit sideways. Hair, sends the flag game down the head to the last lap around. Worked all week, it's time to play. Gonna get a little bit sideways.
Good evening, race fans, and it's that time of the week once again, live from Speed 77 Radio headquarters in Charlotte, North Carolina, and also here in Rock Hill, South Carolina. This is Motorsports Madness on Speed 77 Radio, powered by Race Chaser. Online tonight, we're going to take a look at the world of motorsports. We've got it all from NASCAR and the like, and it all starts right now here on Speed 77 Radio. We're glad that you are along for the ride with us here this evening. Hello everyone and welcome to Speed 77 Radio. I'm Jacob Seelman, the voice of Speed 77, and we are glad that you're with us for another edition of Motorsports Madness here on your home for motorsports, Speed 77 Radio and Race Chaser Online. I'm alongside Tom Baker as we get set to look at the world of motorsports here tonight. And Tom, as we get set to start the show tonight, you know, you gotta love when news starts breaking just before we come on the air to do this, because it just makes our job that much easier. First off, welcome back as always, and boy oh boy do we have a lot to talk about tonight.
Well, it seems like we never lack for things to talk about, Jacob, and when we do lack for things to talk about, we're pretty good at making stuff up, too.
That is true. That is one talent that we certainly have no short supply in, but
Exactly.
oh boy, as we get started tonight, obviously the big story of the weekend was race number 3 of the chase for the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series in Dover, the AAA 400. And when you talk about Dover, you talk about drivers who have had a lot of past success, like the championship leaders, Matt Kenseth, Kyle Busch, and Jimmy Johnson. The top 3 coming into the event, combined between them, had 11 wins at Dover, coming into the AAA 400 on Sunday afternoon. But when we say drivers with a stacked resume, Jimmy Johnson tops the list, 7 wins, tied with Richard Petty and Bobby Allison for the most. And Dover lately has been Johnson's personal playground. It was again on Sunday. He led more than 200 laps in the event, dominating after giving up the lead to Dale Earnhardt Jr. early. Jr., of course, had a miscue trying to get to pit road after starting on the pole. Rallied back to finish second, had 4 tires to Johnson's 2, but it wasn't enough to catch the 5-time champion. Jimmy Johnson holding him off over the final 26-lap run to go to victory lane for the 65th time in his career and the record-breaking 8th time at Dover International Speedway. Tom, we used to call Charlotte Motor Speedway Jimmy Johnson's house. Of course, that was when it was named after his primary sponsor, Lowe's, but here of late, I think Dover has now become the new home of Jimmy Johnson. He's treated it as his personal playground the last couple years. He cuts the deficit to 8 points on Matt Kenseth, and all of a sudden, the drive for the six-pack is alive once again.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to give credit where it's due. I mean, Jimmy Johnson, you and I talked about this last Thursday on our show Thursday night, that I think we both picked him to win. I remember I did, and I think you did as well. Jimmy just, when it comes to Dover, there just is no better. But look, let's be fair here. You know, if it weren't for a couple of circumstances working out in his favor, Jimmy may not have won this race, because Dale Earnhardt Jr., I believe, especially toward the end of the race, was as fast or faster than his teammate Jimmy Johnson. But you had a couple of situations where Junior lost some track position, and it cost him the opportunity to be the leader and to make Johnson have to pass him. I'm not sure that would have happened. So Johnson led a bunch of laps, but certainly toward the end of the race, Junior had a chance to win. So it wasn't complete annihilation, but Jimmy just owns Dover, and they just have a great setup there. And there are certain tracks that certain drivers just gravitate to for whatever reason. And Dover is one of those tracks for Jimmy Johnson. Even when Charlotte was Lowe's Motor Speedway, it was never Jimmy Johnson's house. Yeah, he won a lot there, but there were always drivers that ran well and certainly were capable of winning. When Jimmy was winning a lot at Charlotte, he was winning a lot everywhere. So, but Dover's just a track that Jimmy really does well at all the time. And so not a surprise that he picked up the win, and congratulations to him. And certainly now, as you said, yes, this changes the scenario a little bit, because now Jimmy's right back in the thick of it, and suddenly you're talking about the momentum being shifted into his favor as we come up on some tracks that he traditionally does really well at.
One of those tracks that he traditionally does very well at is this weekend at Kansas. 3 poles and a pair of wins in 14 starts, but he's got 11 top 10s in 14 starts. So statistically, Kansas, too, is another one of Jimmy Johnson's best racetracks. I mean, you can't really call him bad at any racetrack, but statistically, Kansas, one of his best and strongest. Really in the same vein as Matt Kenseth, just like this past weekend at Dover was for Kenseth. If Jimmy's the king of Dover, Matt Kenseth certainly is no slouch at the Monster Mile. Kenseth led some laps, unfortunately took 2 tires for track position on that late pit stop, and it did not work out as well for the 20 team as it did for the 48, Kenseth falling back to finish 7th. But at a track where Matt has won twice and has many top 10 finishes to his credit back from his days with Roush, and a track where Joe Gibbs has won a couple of races in recent years, 7th has to feel like a disappointment for Matt Kenseth, and especially the loss of points to Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah, well, it is, but let's keep this in perspective. 30% of the chase is over. There's still 70% to go. So there's a lot of time here, a lot of races to be run. And again, before we just hand the trophy to Jimmy Johnson this weekend at Kansas, let's keep in mind a couple of things, not the least of which is that last year, Regan Smith was driving Junior's car, and Regan Smith almost won that race. So, Junior's going to be tough again. Any of these 1.5 mile tracks, they're not going to be Jimmy Johnson dominated tracks. There's a lot of cars this year, including Kenseth. Kyle Busch will be right in the thick of it. All the Hendrick cars are going to be tough. The competition from race to race here going down the stretch is really starting to get very exciting. And even though Jimmy led all those laps, and I think everybody realized he was the one to beat, it surely wouldn't have taken much. I mean, Junior had a deal where I think he missed pit road there the one time and then had to slow up another time because I think it was Mark Martin that got in his way, and it cost him just enough. And we could have been talking about Junior's first win. Instead, I think he's been 48 races now without a victory, but boy, he's awfully close, and so is Jeff Gordon. If Casey Kane gets Lady Luck back on his side, I mean, there's any number of cars that can come out and break out at Kansas. We're far from done here. This chase is getting pretty interesting as we go into the sort of the halfway area here. We start approaching race 4, race 5. This is not getting any more defined. There are more and more drivers who are entering into the realm of potential champions here. It's just getting closer.
And that's evidenced by the point that the top 10 drivers on Sunday were all Chase competitors. Jimmy Johnson picking up the win. We mentioned how many laps he led. He led 243 of 400 laps on Sunday. Dale Earnhardt Jr. from pole to finish second. Joey Logano third. Jeff Gordon fourth. Kyle Busch fifth. Kevin Harvick, Matt Kenseth, Ryan Newman, Greg Biffle, Clint Bowyer, the top 10. Jamie McMurray, the first non-Chase driver, in 11th. And Brian Vickers, the last car on the lead lap, in 12th. Just showing how dominant a pace Jimmy Johnson set in the second half of the event. You know, no surprises in the top 10. I think what happened is about what we expected to happen. So looking forward to this Kansas event, Tom, what do you expect to see out of Kansas? I mean, we've seen Matt Kenseth win 5 times on mile-and-a-half racetracks this year. We've seen Jimmy Johnson run solidly at most of them. We've seen Kasey Kahne finish second at 2 of those mile-and-a-half races to Matt Kenseth this season. Can you pick a favorite at Kansas, or is this really going to be all about circumstances come Sunday afternoon? Circumstances and strategy.
Well, you know, I think Andy Reid right now is. Oh, that's football. Wait a minute. No, you can't pick a favorite at Kansas. It would be very difficult to say that there's one driver that's really owned the racetrack to the point where you would, like Jimmy Johnson has Dover, for example, where you can pretty much hand it over. You know, you've got Kyle Busch, you've got Kurt Busch, who, again, don't give up on the 78 team. You know, they've had some issues the last couple of races, but they're capable of being fast enough to run for a win in any event, and I still would not be surprised to see them win at least one of these chase races here before the end of the season. But all of the Hendrick cars, you know, at least 2 of the 3 Gibbs cars, you know, the Roush cars are always tough. Carl Edwards, Greg Biffle, you know, you've just, Ricky Stenhouse is capable of coming up. I don't know if he's capable of running for a win, but certainly being a factor. Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski. I mean, look, Harvick, it's right now, there is as much competition in NASCAR for race wins from race to race as I've seen in a long time. I mean, these teams are on the top of their game. The point race, again, it's getting closer as opposed to, you know, to being more defined. It's just getting more muddy as we go. If it keeps going like this, if you get, you know, a Jeff Gordon or somebody who hasn't won yet to come out and win Kansas, and then we get to race 5 and another new winner surfaces, you know, these last 5 races could end up being real slugfests. So, you know, this is actually setting up to be a very entertaining chase for the Cup here. So I would say, you know, going into Kansas, if I had to pick, you know, you've got to go. I think you've got to go with, you know, the Hendrick cars. You know, one of them, but there again, Matt Kenseth and Kyle Busch would be 2 people that I would stick in there as being just as capable. It's a wide open field.
And oh, by the way, Matt Kenseth has won the last 2 Sprint Cup events at Kansas, and he's the defending winner of this race. So you're right when you say it's not over just by picking one driver. There's about 10 to 15 of them that have a shot to win this event come Sunday afternoon. We're going to take a break here on Motorsports Madness. When we come back, we've got more NASCAR action to talk about, including the nationwide race from the Monster Mile, the Camping World Truck Series race from out in Sin City, and we might even take a trip over to our corner and chill in the recliner for a few minutes to talk some home tracks and sprint car action. All that's coming up next on Motorsports Madness. You're listening to Speed77 Radio, powered by Race Chaser Online. We are your home for motorsports.
Packers,
Vikings,
Red State,
Blue State.
We come from different places.
Uptown,
Downtown.
We come to different conclusions.
half empty,
Half full.
But no matter how different we are, we're all connected, and we can all make a difference. That's why United Way brings people, expertise, and resources together to improve the education, income, and health of our communities, the building blocks for a better life. When we live united, our efforts, magnified by others, add up to real change. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly, so do our communities. But real change won't happen without you.
Live united.
So let's look beyond our differences.
Live united.
One by one, let's make a difference. Let's reach out a hand to one and influence the condition of all.
Live United!
Give, advocate, volunteer, Live United. Sign up today at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Let me drive.
How do you know when it's time to give up the keys? When your dog grabs your keys from your lap and your lap is on the floor. Yep, it's Jeff Foxworthy Parade saying, when you party, be sure to designate before you celebrate.
If you want to make it home alive, let me drive.
A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Transportation, RAD, the National Association of Broadcasters, and the Ad Council.
Just please don't drink and drive. It's not fun.
For every turn, a twist. For every start, an untimely finish. For every win, someone who loses it. For every number, a nation. For every celebration, a brawl. For every split second, years of work. For every heaven, a hell. For every good old boy, a good old girl. For every curse, a prayer. For every ounce of order, a jug of chaos. For every twist, there's a turn.
You're listening to WSPD 77.1. This is Speed 77 Radio, your home for motorsports. Welcome back to Motorsports Madness here on Speed 77 Radio and Race Chaser Online. I'm Jacob Seelman alongside Tom Baker, and we're sitting down for tonight's edition of Motorsports Madness. Welcome to the month of October here on October 1st, 2013. And we're going to take a trip over to the land of the armchairs, the lava lamps, the recliners. He may not be with us right now. He's focusing on his schoolwork. But, you know, it's got to keep the name because there is only one DJ Everett. So we're going to take a trip over to DJ's Corner. And for this edition, we are going to talk, first off, tonight, the World of Outlaws Sprint Car Series. The STP Sprint Cars were in action at Fremont Speedway in New York over the weekend, and if we haven't said his name enough times here, let's say it one more time this season. Donnie Schatz picking up his 21st World of Outlaws Sprint Car Series win of the season at Fremont Speedway over the weekend, moving to within 52 points of Darren Pittman in the chase for the championship. And what's so remarkable about all this is despite 21 wins and Darren Pittman only having 8, he's still got a 52-point lead in the championship. Tom, it's almost shades of Matt Kenseth in 2003. Pittman's consistency trumping the win numbers by Donnie Schatz this season.
Yeah, you know, Pittman is having one of those years that part of him would probably say close but not close enough. But if he wins the championship, he'll gladly take the trophy and all the glory that goes with it. So consistency is the key. That's how we award points in the sport right now, is by results. So, you know, really the trick is to finish as close to the front as you can in every race, and he's certainly doing it. But Schatzy had a heck of a run there, and that's the guy right now that's got the hot hand as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, it is, and it'll be interesting to see. There's only 5 races left for the Outlaws before the end of the season. Of course, all roads lead to Charlotte for a 2-day show at the World Finals the second weekend of November.
Yeehaw!
5 A-mains remaining for the Outlaws this season. Donnie Schatz versus Darren Pittman. It's going to be a whale of a championship. How about the NASCAR home tracks over the weekend? Multiple series in action. The K&M Pro Series East in action at Dover International Speedway for the Drive Sober 150. And I always love a feel-good story, and I think that's what we've got with this one. Out of the Corey LaJoie and LaJoie Racing stables, Austin Hill, the 18-year-old out of Georgia, holding off the field, including challengers like ARCA Racing Series regular Justin Boston and Kyle Benjamin, the short track star, to go to victory lane for just the first time in his K&N Pro Series career, in just his 7th start. He said to me over the weekend, because we talked at Concord Speedway on Saturday, it was the biggest win of his career. Unbelievable drive by that young man who led really from the outset of the second half of the race, took the lead around lap 83 and never looked back, even on a final restart with just 3 laps to go. When Boston and Benjamin took him 3 wide, he never gave up, and it got him the win. Tom, just a feel-good story out of the K&N East ranks, a part-time competitor being able to get it done against the championship challengers.
Yeah, it's always neat when that happens. And, Austin Hill's a great racer. And I think a racer who probably hasn't been given the respect necessarily that he should be due. But of course, there are just so many talented young racers that are nipping at the heels of series like the K&N series. They're either in it already, or they're close to being in it or wanting to be in it. It's just hard to keep all of them in the conversation at the same time. And Austin just did a fantastic job, I thought. And really, you talk about some of these kids, the Justin Bostons, the Kyle Benjamins, you've got so much talent in that series, and you take these drivers, almost any one of these drivers out of that series and put them into a different series, they're champions. And so that there's a lot of competition in that series right now, and an awful lot of good equipment. And when somebody like Austin Hill comes in out of nowhere at a track like Dover and pulls off a win, that says a lot about him and his talent and his ability. And, and as you said, you get put 3 wide and you don't flinch. That's a mental game right there. And so I was happy to see that he got the win.
I think, as were a lot of fans in Dover on Friday afternoon. The K&N West Series was also in action at Napa Speedway over the weekend in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The Napa 150, and that honor of victory lane went to Greg Persley, the veteran and 2011 K&N West Series champion. Persley, with the win, moves to second in the standings behind championship leader Derek Thorne, just 20 points out with 3 races to go. Persley trying to deny Derek Thorne his first championship title. Persley going for his second. So a lot of stories coming out of the K&N West Series as well. Of course, Dylan Kwasniewski was a former star in that series, won the championship in 2012 out on the West Coast. We'll be talking to him a little bit later tonight as well. Whelen Modified Tour was in action at Stafford Motor Speedway, their final event at Stafford for the season, the CarQuest Fall Final. Donnie Leah broke a year-long Whelen Modified Tour winless drought to pick up the victory at Stafford, his 18th career win on the tour, second in the Fall Final. Donnie Leah really not in contention for the championship, but the championship was affected. Ryan Preece going to have to wait till the season finale to clinch the championship. He had problems coming down towards the end of the race, finished 17th. And for Ryan Preece, he carries a 26-point lead into the finale. So for Ryan Preece, it's going to be coming down to the last race of the season once again. And in the South, the Whelen Southern Modified Tour, the Zooland 150 at Caraway Speedway. Andy Seiss going to victory lane at Caraway. Second win at Caraway this season. He holds off GB3 George Brunhosel for the win as Brunhosel closes in on his record 4th Whelen Southern Modified Tour championship. And the Straightliners. And oh, Tom, all the stories that we can talk about coming out of this one boil down to one word, and that word is force. You want to talk about a class winner that made a lot of headlines over the weekend? John Force in Funny Car, picking up his 136th career NHRA national event win. Oh, he moves to within single digits of the championship which would be a record 16th Funny Car title. Tom, if Force wins the title this year, we've not seen it since 2010, but we saw how hard it was to shut him up the last time. There will be no stopping him this time.
Well, I mean, why would he be any more talkative than usual? I mean, that's John Force is one of the rare breed of drivers in this sport who simply could, it doesn't matter if he's winning or not. He draws a crowd just by showing up somewhere. And, you know, he's just such a passionate guy and just so entertaining and so much fun and really, really a good ambassador for the sport of drag racing and, of course, for, you know, his sponsors and his team, etc. It's always great when John Force wins. And I don't know anybody who has a bad word to say about the guy. It's just so much fun. But yeah, it would be great to see him win another championship. I mean, my goodness, you know, he's not getting younger. Not to say that he's going to retire anytime soon, but you know, certainly he's on the downside of his career. And so those championships, as you said, very hard to win. And if he's able to pull this one off, I mean, I think this may be his most popular one ever.
I would tend to agree with that. For Force, again, 136 career national event wins. The other winners for the NHRA Midwest Nationals at Gateway, Antron Brown in Top Fuel, Erica Enders-Stevens in Pro Stock, and after missing 6 races during the regular season, Erica Enders-Stevens now moving into contention for a championship in Pro Stock. That'd be another popular one. And Matt Smith on Pro Stock Bikes were winners with just 3 races to go in the countdown to the championship. So a lot of action even going on in the straight liner world. Before we send it to commercial, a little bit more NASCAR action to talk about. Over the weekend, Saturday afternoon, the NASCAR Nationwide Series was in Dover, as well as the Sprint Cup Series, for their season, second race at Dover for the season for the NASCAR Nationwide Series, and Joey Logano looking for 4 straight wins at Dover. Well, when he sets a record, as I believe one of the press releases said earlier this week, he sets them in style. Logano leading more than 100 laps en route to victory lane in the 5-hour Energy 200. You know, Tom, we always talk about Kyle Busch being the man to beat in the NASCAR Nationwide Series, but here of late, at least up in the Northeast, Joey Logano has a bullseye on Dover International Speedway 4 in a row. At the Monster Mile, that's something nobody's done in any NASCAR National Division, and Logano, the 11th win of the year for Roger Penske's number 22.
Yeah, that car just, again, you have those seasons where you just can't seem to miss no matter what you do. And the 22 car is certainly having one of those years that they are hooked up no matter who drives it. And Joey certainly is more than capable of wheeling it and proved it again this weekend at Dover, a track he really likes and has liked for a while. He adapted to it really well from the start and has really run well there in everything he's raced, and I think that that spoke volumes again this weekend. So anytime Joey wins a Nationwide Series race at this point, it's not a surprise. And certainly he pulled it off, and like you said, when he does it with style.
That he does. And the Camping World Truck Series were in action out in Sin City at Las Vegas in a race that was really taken by storm by Ryan Blaney for the better part of the event. In the end, it comes down to a 3-lap shootout and a couple of veterans of the Truck Series, Timothy Peters and Ron Hornaday on the front row late. Hornaday spins the tires looking for his 52nd win, and Timothy Peters getting away to claim his first victory on a 1.5-mile racetrack. For Peters, it was his 7th career win, and finally breaking the curse of only being able to win on the short tracks. Matt Crafton, though, you know, if you call 11th a bad day, most people would love to finish 11th in a NASCAR event, but for Matt Crafton, who had finished in the top 10 in every event so far this season, Tom, 11th just wasn't enough. He wanted that top 10. He wanted to keep the streak alive. It didn't happen, but he still maintains a 41-point lead going to the Truck Series. Next stop in a couple weeks at Talladega.
Yeah, I mean, he finished well enough. He had what you call a good points day. That's the main thing. He protected the lead, and 41 points is substantial enough as long as he doesn't have a disaster. If he can stay in the top 10 the rest of the way, he should be good. But certainly going to be very interesting. Talladega is one of those races in any division that can shake up a points battle in a hurry, especially this time of year, as we all know. So what would seem like a fairly comfortable advantage is certainly questionable when your next race is at Talladega. So for Crafton, it's just going to be about survival there and trying to, if he can, trying to finish in the top 10 again, and just hope that he can maintain that, at least that advantage coming out of Talladega. After that, it gets a little bit easier to control your own destiny. Talladega is just a wild card.
That it is. We're going to take our halfway caution flag here on Motorsports Madness. When we come back, we're going to take a trip out to Open Wheel Central and catch up with Joel Sebastianelli for more at the wine and cheese table, if you will. That's coming up next on Motorsports Madness here on Speed77 Radio and Race Chaser Online. We are your home for motorsports.
This season, nothing scares Carl Edwards more than losing. Not a 10-car pileup on a fast track. Not trading paint with a car full of clowns. Not that furnace in his basement that sometimes looks like a face. Losing is even scarier than having to choose between starving and eating your best friend Bob.
I don't feel like I've got much time left. Great.
There are only two things that scare Carl Edwards: losing and not winning.
Maybe you know who we are.
But do you know who we really are?
We're ladies.
And not so gentlemen.
We're a mad scientist.
We're outlaws turned heroes.
What a man! We're part athlete,
part astronaut, and all show off. We're a flash mob. We're bigger than most towns. We're everything.
You never expect.
He slammed into the jet drop.
We're always testing the limits and each other.
We're the unknown coming at you at 200 miles per hour.
We're fire. We're smoke.
Nerves colliding with steel.
We're the loudest party on earth.
We live at the corner of Mayhem and Maine.
Oh no! They crossed the line, and guess who wins the race?
Where anything can happen. It usually does.
You're listening to WSPD 77.1. This is Speed 77 Radio, your home for motorsports. Welcome back to Motorsports Madness here on Speed 77 Radio and Race Chaser Online. I'm Jacob Seelman, and now it's time to move into another edition of Open Wheel Central, where we talk IndyCar and F1 action each week here on Motorsports Madness. And tonight, we've got our IndyCar and F1 Open Wheel correspondent, Joel Sebastianelli, back with us to talk the latest news in the open wheel world. Joel, first off, good evening, and certainly a lot of shakeups going on this week in the open wheel world.
Yeah, great to be back on the show as always. Plenty of stuff seems to happen right the day before we go on, so we've never had a shortage of things to talk about. Of course, Tony Kanaan making headlines, as is the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and we've got some F1 coming up as well, so it should be great.
And certainly you mentioned our first topic right there, and that was the released report from the Associated Press just a couple of days ago that Tony Kanaan is set to sign with Chip Ganassi Racing for the 2014 season, leaving KV Racing Technology, where he's spent the last couple of seasons. We've heard they offered him a contract and he turned them down, but you know, when Roger Penske hired Juan Pablo Montoya, we knew Chip Ganassi was going to have to make a power play. How big is it for Ganassi to acquire the defending Indy 500 champion here going into the new season?
Oh, it's huge. Tony Kanaan is a great, great driver. Obviously, finally got the Indy 500 on the board. He's raced with Ganassi before in the Rolex Sports Car Series at Indianapolis, as a matter of fact. So he has a little bit of experience with the team. team, but not all that much. It's great for them to add Kanaan to the lineup, which we would assume is going to be Scott Dixon, Dario Franchitti, Charlie Kimball, and of course TK. And it's a great move for Tony Kanaan as well, because if he couldn't go to Ganassi, a team that has plenty of money and doesn't necessarily need a big sponsorship brought in to afford Tony, well, where else was he going to go? Because it didn't seem like things were really working out at KB Racing, and there weren't that many opportunities for Tony Kanaan either. There was talk of him going to give the Nationwide Series in NASCAR. So it's just as good a move for Tony Kanaan as it is for Chip Ganassi Racing.
And Kanaan, certainly after this is probably his best opportunity since leaving what was once Andretti Green Racing, but since leaving that partnership with Michael Andretti, this is probably Kanaan's best shot at a top-tier ride, or having a top-tier ride here since he left Andretti. What do you expect out of Tony Kanaan for 2014 now that he's signing with the Ganassi team?
Well, I don't expect the title. It is the fourth car at Ganassi, maybe the third. I would assume that it would have a little bit higher standards than Charlie Kimball has, as great as he's been in the 83. But make no mistake about it, the top dogs on that team are the target guys. Scott Dixon, Dario Franchitti. I think that, just by virtue of the fact that he's racing in a Ganassi machine and that he has the driving skill of Tony Kanaan, he's going to be competitive. But I don't see him really contending for the title as much as somebody like Dario or Scott Dixon would be able to do. But we know we'll see him out front at Indianapolis for a little while, and he'll more than likely have better results than he's had with KB Racing, which, quite frankly, outside of a win at the Indianapolis 500, his results there in 2013 have been disappointing.
And speaking of Indianapolis here, as we continue some of the news to talk about, confirming the date for 2014 and the inaugural Grand Prix of Indianapolis, a date of the weekend of May 8th through the 10th to kick off the month of May at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The road course at Indianapolis going to play host to the IndyCar Series for the first time, and a remarkably unchanged road course for the most part. A few modifications being made, most notably a 90-degree right-hand turn going into what would be turn one of the Speedway to create another passing opportunity. But now that we've got it on the table, it's confirmed that the IndyCars are running the road course in 2014. A lot of drivers saying that this is going to produce a different opportunity than the Indianapolis 500. What do you expect out of this road course event in 2014?
The race is going to air live on ABC on May 10th. There's the purist in me that doesn't really like seeing IndyCar racing in the month of May on a track that's not the oval at IMS. Well, I also think that with this car, no matter where you guys, they're going to be competitive. IndyCars put on phenomenal races all season long on both ovals and road courses. Now, the thing with Indianapolis Motor Speedway road is that it's pretty boring. It's the only track Formula One has ever raced on that I've seen that can make F1 cars look dull and dreary. There's no elevation changes. There's no real special corners. It's just cars going around on a flat track with not that many zones to pass in. But they are opening up that new corner, as you mentioned. I still think that Indy can put on a pretty good show on their home turf. I don't think there's going to be nearly as many fans as they would like, though, because fans will flock to this speedway for the 500. I just don't know if fans, especially who aren't from that area, are going to be willing to throw down money to go to another race 3 weeks before. But I'm willing to give it a shot, and I think it's kind of a fun way to open up the month of May at Indy.
It's certainly different. That I can assure the race fans as we get ready to go into this weekend in racing, though. Formula One back in action as well. They're going to be in action for the Korean Grand Prix. The inaugural event was one of the stranger F1 events in recent memory, with a lot of rain, slicks for a long time, and in the end, Red Bull really self-destructing and Fernando Alonso taking the win in what was one of the most unusual races of last season. Fast forward to this season and this weekend, what do we expect from the Korean Grand Prix?
Another Sebastian Vettel victory. Why not? He's been great at Korea. He's won 2 of the 3 races there, including the last 2. Red Bull has always been strong there. I just see no reason that the season shouldn't continue the way it's been recently. They are the team to beat, and at least in terms of Sebastian Vettel's machine, Red Bull has been flawless. Mark Webber has had some trouble, but all in all, this is a place where Sebastian Vettel shines, as he has in the entire continent. He's won a third of the races, won in Asia for Formula One. So I think that Vettel will be the man to beat once again. That title lead is going to grow even more insurmountable on Fernando Alonso.
Is this the point in the season where we basically look at it and say this is Sebastian Vettel's title to lose? Is there really any way that anybody else can get to it if Vettel doesn't self-destruct?
The title can't be won by anyone else. It has to be lost by Vettel. With the way the Formula One points work, it's 25 points for first place, 1 for 10th, and then 0 anywhere else. So at this point, Alonso would have to win 3 straight Grand Prix to get up there towards the points lead. With Sebastian Vettel out of the points, if he finishes 4th or 5th, and Alonso wins every race towards the end, the fact of the matter is he's really not going to get there. So Vettel has to lose. There's got to be a string of really unfortunate events for Red Bull, because I just don't see any way that Alonso, even if he was to win every single Grand Prix from here on out, could do it without tons of help from Red Bull shooting themselves in the feet.
We've seen it happen before in Korea, but I agree with you, Joel. With the way they've run lately, I don't see that it's going to happen. And that's not to mention there's more than just F1 racing this weekend, Joel. IndyCar also in action this weekend on the streets of Houston for the first time in several years. Sebastian Bourdais, one of the few drivers in the field with experience at Houston, but it's been a while, almost to the kart days, since open-wheel cars have been on the streets of Houston. Helio Castroneves comes in with almost a full race lead in the points. Scott Dixon looking to capitalize. He swept Toronto. Can Dixon sweep Houston to keep his championship aspirations alive, or is Castroneves in the driver's seat right now?
Well, it's going to be tough, I think, because of the long gap in between races here at Houston. I think we're going to see even more parity this week. So everyone, nobody's really been on this course before. Nobody really knows what to expect. They've all got the same data, which is no data at all. So I think that it's going to be a little bit more difficult to stop this than it normally would be. It definitely wouldn't surprise me to see him win 1, but winning 2 is really, really difficult to do on a doubleheader weekend. He's pulled it off before, but as good as he is, I think he's going to have to settle for maybe 1. I think the aggression that he's going to have to race with this week in order to catch Helio Castroneves is going to end up coming back to haunt him. When you race extra aggressive, you're going to be putting your nose out there. You're going to be getting into incidents, and whether you like it or not, that's just something that is probably going to happen to Scott Dixon at one point or another. He's not going to have the luxury that Helio Castroneves will have to be able to just ride around in the pack, not force the issue, and take care of his car. He's going to have to put his car on the line. And Houston doesn't seem to have too many really great passing zones, which doesn't quite bode well in his favor either. I'm interested to see what Sebastian Bourdais can do as well. He's in need of another good result. Looked great in Baltimore for a while, almost had a race win in Toronto. This could be the opportunity for him to finally shine and break through too.
Oh, so many options, Joel, as you've said. If you had to narrow it down to 1, make a bold prediction on who's going to win this weekend, who would you go with?
If I'm going to go on the line and just pick 1, it's not really putting my neck out there, but I would say Scott Dixon probably wins 1.
Okay. It's certainly going to be interesting to see. That's for sure. Joel Sebastianelli, again, always great to have you on the show. It's going to be an exciting weekend, and I know you'll be keeping an eye on it just as we will be. Of course, stay safe down there in Florida, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks a lot. Great to be on as always. Enjoy the races this weekend.
That's Joel Sebastianelli for Open Wheel Central. We're going to take a caution flag here on Motorsports Madness, powered by Race Chaser Online. When we come back to Speed 77 Radio, we'll have 2012 K&N West Series champ and 2013 K&N East Series championship leader. He's also making his ARCA Racing Series debut this weekend. Dylan Kwasniewski joins us in the studio next. You're listening to Motorsports Madness on Speed77 Radio, powered by Race Chaser. Online, we are your home for motorsports. You're listening to WSPD 77.1. This is Speed77 Radio, your home for motorsports. Welcome back to Motorsports Madness here on Speed77 Radio, powered by Race Chaser Online. We're here in the Speed77 studio and still waiting on Dylan Kwasniewski to check in here in the studio with us.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. He was confirmed with us for 8:15, and every once in a while it just doesn't go as planned. So maybe Dylan got sidetracked here. We hope not. Hopefully we'll get him on here in the next couple of moments and at least be able to spend some time on air with him. But if not, we'll try to get him on next Tuesday's show. I know all the folks at Spire Sports had us confirm, and we were all set to go. It happens sometimes, but in the meantime, some news out of NASCAR, Jacob. Today, one team changing manufacturers for 2014. Now, this may not seem like a huge deal to some, but it's always kind of interesting when you get a trend like this.
Yes, it is, and that would be Germain Racing. They've been with Ford and Roush Yates the last couple years, but announced earlier today that they will be switching to Chevrolet for the 2014 season and striking up a technical alliance with Richard Childress Racing, just as the Furniture Row 78 team has done this year, and we've seen how much that has paid off with Kurt Busch being behind the wheel. Obviously, we've seen Casey Mears have some success in the Cup Series, not necessarily with Germain Racing, but we saw him perform well at Hendrick. He won the Coca-Cola 600 back in 2007. I can't help but think that it may not be a step to winning equipment yet, but I have to say Richard Childress Technical Alliance for the Germain team could pay some dividends for Casey Mears. We've already seen him run in the top 20 and top 15 this year. I could see that team becoming a top 10 team here in 2014.
Well, it's one of those situations. You look at Furniture Row. You look at the. Do we know for sure? I've lost track here. There's been so much going on in NASCAR lately. Jacob, did the 47 team actually change brands or not?
It's not been announced yet whether the 47 is going to shift from Toyota. We're still waiting on word from them. We had heard a rumor that they were shifting also to have a technical alliance with Childress, so that seems to be in a wait-and-see kind of a holding pattern right now, but we know for sure that the 13, at least, will be with Chevrolet next year, and possibly the 47 to join them.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's always interesting when you get a trend like this developing, and certainly the alliance between RCR and Furniture Row has worked out very well. There's no reason to think that similar things and similar results wouldn't happen with the 13. And I think this is a bit of a wave of the future. You see these teams, these one-car teams, it's a way for them to have at least some of the same information and some of the same advantages that the multi-car teams have. And at the same time, it allows the teams like RCR to have the same in reverse, more people to, R&D, that kind of thing. So I think this is going to be interesting to watch, to see how much this does affect Germain Racing's performance level, and I suspect that top 10 to 15 is reasonable, especially in the next 1 to 2 years if they can get things worked out there. And I would see similar results with the 47 car, although I would see that being the case regardless. With AJ Allmendinger having a full season, I would go as far as to say that I think consistency would be a good bet with this team, and to see them contend for a bottom-end chase spot would not be totally surprising for me with AJ and the group.
That's an interesting comment right there, but it's one that I had considered myself. A.J. Allmendinger jumping into that 47 next year, and we've already seen him perform in the top 15 and top 10 a couple of times this year for that 47 team. So, you know, all of a sudden that equipment is looking a little bit better and a little bit better with every race that A.J. Allmendinger gets behind the wheel of that 47 machine. So it'll be very interesting to see how that all plays out here in the coming weeks and months as we get moving forward towards 2014. Another piece of news out of the NASCAR garage, though, and that was from the Turner Scott Motorsports organization and from NASCAR. Nelson Piquet Jr., it was announced earlier this evening, he has been put on indefinite probation, fined $10,000 and ordered to NASCAR-mandated sensitivity training for use of a slur during last weekend's event at Dover International Speedway in reference to a fellow driver's picture on Twitter. So for Nelson Piquet Jr., obviously the money really is no object. Indefinite probation, you can say yes and no. NASCAR for so many years has not defined probation very clearly, but the biggest deal about it is that NASCAR is holding up to the standard that they held up with earlier this season when Jeremy Clements was penalized for a similar incident.
Yeah, and you know, I've already seen some posts from the blogosphere or the social media sphere about, you know, NASCAR being too prim and proper and politically correct. You know what? Those kinds of comments shouldn't be appropriate in any setting. I don't understand why people would jump on NASCAR for taking action against this kind of stuff. You just, you know, I think unfortunately we've gotten this disturbing trend in this country that we figure we can say anything and that it should be okay as long as we said it. It's not okay, and you know, I think we need to we need to just think about a little bit more carefully what we're doing, and especially what we put on a post. You know, there are certain things you just shouldn't do, and I would hope that Nelson would come to realize that, you know, maybe that just wasn't appropriate, and you know, would learn to express himself a little differently, and I would not expect him to be out of NASCAR very long. You know, he might miss a race or two, but I would expect him to be back soon enough. But it just wasn't really, it wasn't a nice thing to say, even if it was meant in the spirit of humor, which, you know, again, you know, I think we just need to learn to watch what rolls off our tongues.
That we do, and certainly it's going to be interesting to see how that storyline plays out here in the coming days and weeks here. Turner Scott Motorsports releasing a statement that they had also spoken with Nelson Piquet Jr. and that he, quote, now understands what it means to represent the Turner Scott Motorsports organization. So obviously the team handling things as well as NASCAR. So Nelson Piquet going to be walking maybe a little bit of a fine line, but if all goes as I'm sure the organization would hope for it to go, probably not many lasting consequences from this.
No, probably not. And again, you know, we don't want to make too big a deal of it, but it is a big deal. You just have to be careful what you say. You got to understand the times we live in the situations, and just be a little bit more responsible. And I'm quite sure that this will be handled, and it'll be in the past, and Nelson will be back racing, and you know, and we'll move forward in a more educated manner, so to speak. You know, I think we're about to the checkered flag here, Jacob, and want to apologize to those folks who tuned in to hear Dylan Kwasniewski. Not sure what happened. We had the confirmation, and we're told that he would be with us around 8:15 Eastern Time, and just for whatever reason didn't happen. So we'll do our best to get him on a future show as soon as possible, and hopefully it was just a mix-up, or you know, Dylan getting sidetracked at the last minute, which of course happens from time to time in our busy lives. So we hope to have Dylan on a future show, and again, we apologize that we weren't able to have him on this evening as we had been told we would.
And I guess that will wrap it up for Motorsports Madness, the checkered flag. So for all of you listeners out there and all of you watching tonight and listening tonight on Speed77 Radio Online, I'm Jacob Seelman for Tom Baker, Kyle Souza, Joel Sebastianelli, DJ Everett, and the entire staff and crew here at Speed77 Radio and Race Chaser Online. Keep it off the wall until we meet again, and we'll see you at the track. So long, everybody.